Good morning from Coyote Country, California. I'm Dr. Caroline Heldman, and here are your headlines for the third week of June 2021. First up, a very important ruling yesterday from the Department of Education, and this is a photo of Miguel Cardona, the Secretary of Education. He announced that the department will be extending Title IX protection to transgender students. A little bit of history here in order to understand the significance of this ruling. The Title IX protections were initially passed in 1972 and then implemented in 1973 as part of a number of laws that protected against discrimination in education. So Title IX was initially established for pay discrimination in educational institutions. It was very quickly extended to women in sports or girls in sports. And that's probably what comes to mind when you think of Title IX today. But what this ruling has done is it's extended it to discrimination against gay and transgender students. You might recall that about a decade ago, we extended it to protect against sexual violence as being a form of gender discrimination. Well, now the Department of Education is broadening their interpretation of the term gender. This means that all of these laws that are passing at the state level to bar transgender athletes from participating in sports and also from using the bathroom of their choice will now be illegal, according to this federal guideline. Now, this isn't the end of it. States will file lawsuits against this. This is a very contentious, hotly debated issue. It has much more to do with the breakdown of the binary, the gender, sex, sexuality binary, than it does these students themselves. It's really scary when the world is shifting so rapidly. But at the end of the day, gender, sex, and sexuality in the binary that hold that all together have always been a social construct. And now we are seeing that social construct falling apart, mostly because social media has allowed young people to really explore this social construct. And at the end of the day, we now have the federal government responding to that, and in a very empathetic way, in a way that is far more empathetic than these draconian, low empathy state laws. So I'm excited to see what happens next with this. I know years of lawsuits, but it's a very good move on the part of the federal government. The second big headline, the Biden administration took its first trip overseas. Joe Biden met with G7 leaders all last week and leading up into this week. But the big kind of unveiling of this trip was his sitting down with Putin, the president of Russia. And he amassed global support for this meeting, so he was able to speak on behalf of the US and its allies in letting Putin know that we won't stand for election interference, we won't stand for cyber attacks, we won't stand for ransomware attacks. He also pushed back against the human rights violations that Putin has always engaged in, but has ramped up in recent years. Both parties said this was a constructive meeting. Biden goes into it knowing that Putin has played presidents since his time in office, that this is not going to be something where they have a handshake and a deal. But the fact that both countries signed on to looking at cyber attacks is important. But more importantly, Biden threatened Putin. He was very clear in saying, look, you continue with these cyberware attacks, you continue with the ransom attacks, the US is going to engage in kind. My guess is that we've already demonstrated our might and power in doing so. He was very clear with Putin what would happen next. Biden also gave Putin a list of 16 sectors that he is not to touch, suggests that there are other sectors he should touch. I don't know how effective that list was, but okay. I love Biden's pessimism, right? He said, quote, this is not about trust. This is about self-interest. This is not a kumbaya moment. Biden was also very careful in not having a joint press conference with Putin in order to not validate him as the same stature of leader on the global stage. At the end of the day, the U.S. presidency and Putin's relationship with the U.S. president is vitally important for establishing that he is a world leader. So Biden gave him enough to do that, but did not validate him on the same stage as Biden with the same stature. The third big headline for this third week in June, pure insanity. That is how Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen described Trump's efforts to get the Department of Justice involved in overturning a free and fair election. So we now have a secret trove of emails that have been released from the Trump White House, and it appears that the chief of staff and Trump's allies and lower level officials in the administration were constantly sending the Department of Justice emails trying to get them to validate the big lie that this free and fair election was not free and fair. And as I noted, Jeffrey Rosen, in correspondence with his staff, was very dismissive of these efforts. It is heartening to see that the Department of Justice was properly dismissive. It is scary to think of how Trump believed he could simply use the Department of Justice during his time in office as an extension of his office, as though the Attorney General was the president's attorney. There's always been a firewall between the president and prosecutions and investigations at the Department of Justice. And this is something that really infuriated Trump. If you recall, he went after Jeff Sessions, his first attorney general, via Twitter. He went after Mueller in the Department of Justice. Barr did his bidding. Barr should be embarrassed and frightened for his contribution to the decay of our democracy during his time as Attorney General, when he did simply do Trump's bidding in a way that really deteriorated the integrity of the department, and Rosen wouldn't stand for it. So good to see that they stood up to Trump. From the White House, sticking with this theme, the House Judiciary Committee conducted an investigation of the Trump Department of Justice, requesting that Apple turn over records, metadata for phone records for Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, McCann, who is in the White House, and a number of journalists. And I'm putting up the Guardian headline because it is important to note that, at least in terms of spying on journalists, this is something that presidents have been doing routinely and increasingly for the past 2 decades. It is a problem. Obama amplified efforts to spy on journalists, the point being to find leaks in the White House. And what the House Judiciary Committee investigation has revealed is that the Department of Justice went beyond journalists to members of Congress. That really threatens our balance of power, right? It threatens this idea of checks and balances. And it is interesting to note that Merrick Garland came out today, or yesterday and today, met with journalists, met with folks at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and other publications, and assured folks that the Department of Justice will not be spying on journalists. He did not assure anyone that the Department of Justice would not be spying on members of Congress. What is so scary about Swalwell and the Trump administration spying on Swalwell and Schiff is that this is what is happening behind the scenes while Trump is rage tweeting against them because they are trying to hold him accountable for various violations of the Constitution. So again, we see a completely inappropriate use of presidential power through the Department of Justice in ways that threaten our democracy. Checks and balances are there for a reason. And Donald Trump either was unaware of the rules or didn't care, but either way, he bent and broke the rules of the presidency in fundamental ways that it is nice to see Biden restoring that, but also very telling that it's not enough to just, rely on presidents to simply go along with protocols. They need to be written in stone. Your last big headline, we will end with some great news today. Congress yesterday just approved Juneteenth as a national holiday. What is Juneteenth? Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln on September 22nd, 1862. And then 2 years later, on June 19th, 1865, slavery was finally and officially abolished. It took 2 years, and it took the Army moving across and letting enslaved people know that slavery had ended in order to actually make that happen. It's really dark to think about. I mean, it's great that we're celebrating Juneteenth, but so dark to think about the fact that, slavery didn't just end with the Emancipation Proclamation, that people lost 2 whole years. Some people, enslaved people, lost 2 whole years of their lives because this wasn't respected in southern states. And so it actually took the army moving across, the Union Army moving across and freeing slaves throughout the Confederacy for that to happen. This happened actually in Galveston, Texas, and the former slaves who were set free that year celebrated Juneteenth. Almost 100 years later, a group of Black business people got together and bought about 10 plots of land and put them together and established Juneteenth Freedom Park, which is where the celebration takes place every year. It became very popular in the 50s and 60s. In the 1980s, it started to become a national holiday. And finally here in 2021, we are celebrating it as a national holiday. What a joyous occasion. As you go out into the rest of your week and your weekend, please be kind to yourself, be really kind to others, and rock on.